The History of Poland podcast, episode 42. What is even happening? Hello and welcome back. Last time we left off with the death of Konrad of Mazovia. Konrad wasn't really a great leader, but he did have one attribute that was noteworthy: persistence. He persisted in pushing for his claim to the seniorate. He persisted in trying to get people to pay attention to him. He persisted in making himself a nuisance in other provinces. He persisted in attacking and raiding other people's lands. And most of all, he persisted in having one policy: self-promotion. But were the results of this policy good? Were they bad? Well, that's going to be the first topic of today's episode. You may hear that and think, oh my goodness, we're going to spend an entire episode just talking about Konrad of Mazovia's legacy? How droll, how very dreary. My answer to that is twofold. One, no, of course we're not. That would be very boring. And two, yeah, in a way we will be talking about his legacy. But it's not just his legacy. It's the legacy of all of the Piast princes of this time. Let me explain. I've mentioned in the past that this period of Polish history is known as the Fragmentation of Poland. The fragmentation started in 1138 upon the death of Bolesław III, when he divided Poland into different sections. The idea behind this was that there were going to be a number of Piast princes, so it was only fair that they all got to rule over something. To make sure they all got in on the ruling game, but that the nation was still somewhat unified, Bolesław made it so the eldest Piast male would have lands that were far wealthier and more powerful than the other territories. As we've seen over the last century, this has turned out to be a disaster. The Piast princes may have started off with the intention of following the words of this legally binding document, but over time, the importance of that document has faded, and the reality that land is up for grabs has become more clear. That brings us to Konrad. Konrad was much like any other Piast ruler. He wanted more. He wasn't unique, but there were wars going on all over the place. Anywhere you look, there was conflict. Brother against brother, cousin against cousin. I'll be honest, I find it difficult to describe the chaos and enmity at place in Poland. The system of people sharing and cooperating had failed so fully that it's difficult to put it into words. So instead, I'm going to rely on Homer to help explain the situation. From the Iliad, quote, Achilles glared at him and answered, Fool, prate not to me about covenants. There can be no covenants between men and lions. Wolves and lambs can never be of one mind, but hate each other out and through. Therefore there can be no understanding between you and me, nor may there be any covenants between us, till one or other shall fall and glut grim Mars with his life's blood. Put forth all your strength. You have need now to prove yourself indeed a bold soldier and man of war. You have no more chance, and Pallas Minerva will forthwith vanquish you by my spear. You shall now pay me in full for the grief you have caused me on account of my comrades whom you have killed in battle. End quote. That fairly sums up the situation in Poland. The reasons for the war have been forgotten. The reason why two brothers had a falling out 50 years in the past are now irrelevant. Instead, there is just the momentum of conflict, the desire for more, the need for vengeance wrapped up to make it look like justice. That's Konrad's legacy, just as much as it's the legacy of any Piast prince in the 13th century. Sure, there were good rulers and there were bad rulers. People who knew how to administer a government, people who were brave in battle, honest in law, and devoted to doing the right thing. But despite some good character traits, they seem to be swamped by the mountain of villainy crushing Poland and its people. In the years following Konrad's death, the fragmentation continued. I think of it like a loose thread on a sweater. It's nothing to worry about at the beginning, but if you tug on it over and over again, the sweater will fray, and given enough time, it will eventually fall apart completely. So instead of talking through every time someone tugged on an individual thread of the sweater, I'm going to hit the 2x button. What does that mean? Well, it means you'd better pay attention. A lot is going to happen in this episode. It'll be a bit longer than normal, but we'll be covering a lot of ground. In a way, it's like getting stuck in a swamp and needing to use 10 times the effort to get out of it. We're putting in that effort today. So, after the death of Konrad, war broke out between the Piast relatives. Surprise! We have a handful of different battles going on. In Silesia, Bolesław the Bald goes to war against his brother, Henry of Wrocław, as part of an ongoing dispute about the division of land among the brothers. That's going to be a recurring theme. Boleslav hires some mercenaries and plunders Henry's territory. Boleslav eventually lays siege to Wrocław, but the city resists, and after a few months, Boleslav withdraws. The next year, Boleslav the Bald invades again, is repulsed again, and upon returning home, is taken captive by his own people, who are like, hey, stop it, come on. He doesn't. Instead, Boleslav the Bald invades again. Again, he is repulsed. As a result, Jan Długosz tells us that, quote, Boleslav is now up to his ears in debt, deserted and despised by his own men, as well as by the mercenaries whom he has never paid, and by the brigands who now occupy more and more of the country's strongpoints. He is reduced to such penury that, without even a servant, he roams the country, not on horseback, but on foot, accompanied only by his page, Surian, the two of them living off other people. In the end, Boleslav is captured by some of his brother Henry's men and imprisoned in Wrocław Castle. Eventually released, he seeks refuge in Legnica, from where he never ceases plotting against his brothers. End quote. So that's the situation in Silesia over a period of 3 years. But don't worry, there's more where that came from. Elsewhere in Poland, Boleslav the Chaste, and just as a side note, there are a significant number of different Boleslavs floating around at this point, so I'll try to distinguish them by their nicknames. Sorry if this gets confusing, there's really no other way to do it. There are just a lot of Boleslavs. But Boleslav, the Prince of Krakow, has decided to push for the canonization of the former Bishop of Krakow, Stanisław. After quite a bit of back and forth with the Pope, papal politics, and intrigue in the background, and a fact-finding mission, Stanisław is eventually canonized. This is a big deal for Poland. But the years continue to roll on by with nary a peaceful moment to see. I want to give you a flavor of what these decades are like, but it's difficult to do. It'd be like trying to explain the exact movements of every single bee in a beehive, one after the other. At a certain point, you just lose track. Does that mean an individual bee isn't important? Not at all. It's just that, well, the movements aren't important on an individual basis. To explain that, I think the best way to do it would be to highlight the years of 1251 to 1279. It's a long chunk of time, but as I quickly go through these highlights, all pulled directly from the Chronicle of Jan Długosz, just remember two things. 1. This is a period of only 28 years. And 2. If you're living through this, there is no end in sight of this onslaught of events. So let's get started. I will try to make this as painless as possible. 1251. The Duke of Opole decides to pay his sister-in-law her dowry of 500 silver marks. As the money and lands are transferred, another duke steps in and takes possession of the lands. Meanwhile, Boleslav the Bald tries to hold a nobleman hostage to raise funds to pay for mercenaries to fight his brother, but his retainers are so outraged that they hand over all of their castles to his brother. 1252. Boleslav the Bald is super irritated that his knights and noblemen have abandoned him, so he hires some assassins to kill his brother Conrad. Conrad goes to another duke to mediate. Boleslav the Bald doesn't like this and plans to attack Conrad. In the process, he's captured, and after bribing his guard, he's released. In the south, King Bela of Hungary invades Moravia, Austria, and Styria. 1253. Bela's invasion of Moravia is going smashingly well. Relics are stolen, churches are burned, and booty is plundered. Bela then pressures his son-in-law, Boleslav, who is known as both Boleslav the Chaste and Boleslav the Bashful, to invade. He acquiesces, plundering and enslaving many captives. 1254. Boleslav takes a liking to this plundering and decides to take the province of Opava from the Czechs. Meanwhile, Duke Casimir imprisons his wife, while the rest of his family, Boleslav the Bald and Conrad of Silesia, are at each other's throats over their inheritance rights. 1255. Up in Pomerania, war is raging between Swiatopolk and some political rivals. Swiatopolk calls up some reinforcements from Boleslav the Bashful and the Duke of Mazovia, laying siege to Nakvo. 1256. The war in Pomerania continues without much success, but with plenty of inconclusive battles taking place. If you're wondering why they're fighting, so are the fighters. As Długosz tells us, Swiatopolk realizes that he is being dragged into a fierce and cruel war with his nephews and their supporters over a castle. 1257. Boleslav the Bald is still fighting with his brother Conrad. He invites Conrad to a banquet under the pretenses of reconciliation.
It's a trap!
Conrad realizes it's a trap and walks in anyway with only a few men. He notices that Boleslav has all his men positioned on the ramparts, so he makes the first move, grabs his brother, and pulls him out of the castle before his men can get to him. He then hustles away to a group of men he is waiting outside. 1258. The Duke of Gniezno wages war against his enemies. Fulko, the Archbishop of Gniezno, who has been Archbishop since the days of Władysław Spindleshanks back in 1232, dies. Bolesław the Chaste, meanwhile, calls together all the cousins for a conference. The topic? It's not peace. No, Bolesław wants to build a nunnery so that women can have a place to go. Everyone applauds. Poland is still at war with itself. But at least there's some cooperation happening, I guess? Silver lining. 1259. War in Pomerania continues. It is not decisive. But what is decisive is that the Mongols invade for the second time. This should come as no surprise, but the weakened and fractured Poland loses to the Mongols yet again. Wow, who really could have seen that coming? As Długosz says, in these 3 months, the Tatars inflict more damage than they did 18 years previously. So that's fun. 1260. Is Poland going to wake up, realize they need to unite, and centralize authority? No, they are not. Instead, the various Piasts pick sides in the ongoing war between Moravia and Hungary, fighting against each other. 1261. With Prussia in a back-and-forth struggle over deciding whether or not to become Christianized, some Poles team up with the Teutonic Knights and lead a punitive expedition against Prussia. But that's not the biggest thing that's been going on. No, because 1261 is the year the Flagellants arrive in Poland. Let's let Długosz describe this for us. Quote, the Flagellants, a sect that apparently started in France and then gained considerably in strength in Germany, now reaches Poland. Their errors are many and depraved. They go in procession with their heads covered like nuns, but otherwise bare to the navel, and beat each other on the shoulders with scourges of quadruple thongs knotted at the end. They also perform strange stoops and genuflections, sing embarrassing songs, each in his own tongue, for the members are of different nationalities. Although they are all laymen, not priests, they hear each other's confession and give each other absolution, sometimes for quite serious sins. They recruit those who are doing penance, telling them that their sect is dear to God, and brings great comfort and advantage to the souls of those near them. When these Flagellants reach Krakow, they are at once moved on by Prandota the bishop, who threatens them with prison unless they quickly remove themselves. When the other Polish bishops expose the falseness of the Flagellant doctrine, the dukes all order their people not to accept this kind of error under pain of confiscation of property. In other countries, the sect is attacked with fire and the sword. It soon disappears. End quote. 1262. Some Ruthenians and Lithuanians invade Mazovia. They capture the duke without even a battle. Afterwards, when the Mazovians do fight back, they lose. Bolesław the Chaste is worried about all the invasions going on, what with the Mongols, Ruthenians, Prussians, Lithuanians, etc., all invading Poland. He decides to take decisive action, and he moves the nuns from Zawichos to Krakow. 1263. The war between the Prussians, Ruthenians, and Lithuanians continues. It is inconclusive. Everything is inconclusive. What is even the point? 1264. Bolesław the Chaste decides to go to war against the Yakvingians, who keep raiding his lands. They're up north on the borders of Mazovia, Ruthenia, and Lithuania. They're apparently skilled fighters, but they are no match for Bolesław, who kills every single person who opposes him. Word is sent to the Pope, asking for a bishop to be sent to shepherd the survivors. 1265. Leszek the Black, the grandson of Conrad of Mazovia, comes of age and inherits lands. But it doesn't stop there. He's also adopted by Bolesław the Chaste of Krakow as his heir. Why does he need an heir? Come on, he's not named Bolesław the Chaste for nothing. The will is witnessed by many and legally binding. That does not mean it's popular. 1266. Bolesław the Chaste invades Ruthenia. The Ruthenians are soundly defeated, and so many are killed by the Poles that there were survivors only because the Poles got, quote, sick of slaughter. As Długosz tells us, this disaster so curbs and subdues the Ruthenians that for many years they never again dare set foot on Polish soil. Yay, something decisive finally happened. 1267. Papal legates arrive in Krakow, preaching crusade and asking for money and volunteers to go fight in the Holy Land. Boxes are put in various churches to collect money. In exchange for donations, people are guaranteed remission for their sins. The city of Antioch falls, Jerusalem has already fallen. Unsurprisingly, donations pour in. 1268. Duke Casimir, the father of Leszek the Black, dies of an illness. One less Piast. Status quo, the same. 1269. Przemysl, Duke of Wyszynsk, is new to being a duke. He also loves the Teutonic Knights. So much so that his subjects think he's ignoring them, and they rebel. 1270. A pact is sworn. King Stephen of Hungary decides to go visit the tomb of Saint Stanislav and also to visit his sister, the wife of Bolesław the Chaste. While in Krakow, Bolesław and Stephen swear on the Bible that they will, quote, share misfortunes, good fortune, jointly to combat impending and future difficulties, to have the same friends and the same enemies, and to maintain unchanged their pact of friendship. Thus sworn, Stephen returns to Hungary. 1271. The wife of Leszek the Black, Duchess Gryfina, assembles the nobles, knights, and leaders. The purpose of this assembly? Well, Gryfina wants everyone to know that despite being married for 6 years, the two have not consummated their marriage. She accuses Leszek of being impotent. Then she removes her hood, which signifies being married, and as Długosz describes it, goes about with her head uncovered, behaving as a maiden and avoiding the company of Leszek. Her aim is to have her marriage dissolved. Meanwhile, in Krakow, the Bishop of Krakow decides he doesn't really care about the rules governing his role, absconds with a nun, and lives the life that he feels suited to. This leads to quite a scandal. 1272. Stephen of Hungary dies after only 2 years of ruling. 1273. Bolesław the Chaste goes to a negotiation with King Ottokar of Bohemia to hash out their differences. They agree to a 20-year armistice. On his return, Bolesław finds out that the aforementioned Bishop of Krakow has instigated a rebellion. Some knights take the side of the bishop, likely because they were upset that Bolesław appointed Leszek to be his successor without consulting them, along with other miscellaneous injustices. The two sides meet, there is battle, Bolesław wins, and in retribution does a mass confiscation of property. Unsurprisingly, this does not make him very popular with the people whose property was confiscated. 1274. Bolesław the Chaste and Władysław of Opole go to war. Can you believe it? A war between two Piast relatives? Shocking, I know. 1275. Bolesław the Chaste takes a break from battle, looks around, and realizes that his heir, Leszek the Black, is in a precarious position. His wife continues to accuse him of, quote, frigidity and impotence. He reconciles the two of them, likely because the damage of the accusation would have negated any inheritance plans that Bolesław had, and there's no more drama. At least, there's no more reported drama. I bet there was drama. 1276. Winter comes early, covering the lands in frost in September. The mountains are blanketed with snow. Life was already hard. Now, life is also cold. 1277. Bolesław the Bald goes to war against Henry of Wrocław. Bolesław is not successful. The constant civil war leaves Poland open to more attacks. Długosz reports that a Lithuanian invasion leads to the capture of nearly 40,000 men, women, and children into bondage. 1278. Bolesław the Bald finally dies. Długosz is not kind to him in his death. His eulogy, if you could call it that, says, quote, violent in his behavior to his own people and to others, he remains to the last embroiled in an infamous love affair with his concubine. His speech, hurried and unclear, was often the cause of laughter and mockery. He was a cheat and a provocateur, over hasty in pronouncing judgment. End quote. So that's Bolesław the Bald. He will not be missed. 1279. Bolesław the Pious dies. Bolesław the Chaste also dies after ruling for 37 years. His wife, Kinga, dons a habit and becomes a nun. Długosz tells us that, quote, she never allowed herself to shed a tear, but, thinking only of Christ, her betrothed, rendered continual thanks for having been relieved of a heavy burden. So that's one way to grieve the death of your longtime husband. In Bolesław the Chaste's place, Leszek the Black steps in and becomes duke. Deep breath. If you got lost along the way through those events, you are not alone. Which was, if I'm being totally honest, kind of the point. There is a certain exhaustion that comes with reading about the events of the mid-13th century in Poland. An exhaustion that I can only imagine was exceeded by that of those who lived through the events. In the decades I just skimmed past, there was endless bloodshed. There was war, invasions, reprisals, assassinations, kidnappings. But what does it all mean? I mean, on the face of it, the status quo really did not change throughout that entire time. But on a deeper level, I think that hearing all of these events side by side gives us an insight into something unique. It gives us a look into a world in serious need of change. Personally, I think these decades really make the case for a unified Poland. I mean, there is just so much energy, so many warriors, so much wealth and industry, and just a lot of political savvy. But it's all being directed inwards against each other. I think that if you were to imagine the effect of a Poland that was united, where the resources were combined, you could see the seed of a truly great European power. But that power is being arrested by the internal strife and by the fragmentation. This situation will change, but for now Poland is stuck in quicksand, thrashing about but hitting only itself. We'll pick up with this next time. In the meantime, if you want to hear more about self-destructive behavior, I have a new history podcast that covers World War I. I've hinted at it over the last few months, and I'm finally ready to take off the wrapping paper. It's called World's End, The Great War. It's a daily history podcast that will cover, in a few minutes every day, the events of World War I as they happened through the eyes of a British newspaper, the Globe and Traveller. I've been hard at work on this for months now, and I'm so excited to share it with you all. You can subscribe to the podcast in all the usual places by searching for World's End, The Great War. I'll also post a link in the description of this episode so you can easily find it. Right now, there's just a trailer that's being published, but the first real episode is going to come out on June 20th. So if you've subscribed now, you can make sure not to miss it. That's June 20th. For those of you familiar with the history of World War I, you may have an inkling of why I'm starting at the end of June. It has to do with Serbia. Also, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all the patrons of this podcast. Your support has not only made the History of Poland podcast possible, it's also made this new podcast possible as well. I can truthfully say that without your backing, this new show would have been impossible to get off the ground. If you want to join the ranks of those who make these shows possible, you can do so at patreon.com/History of Poland podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.